All right, guys, welcome back to another Kaleidospoke episode with myself, Aaron, and the lovely Richie Rich. If you haven't followed already, follow us on Instagram, on Twitter, and if you want to listen to any of our podcasts, go on any of the major audio platforms, Spotify, Apple, leave us a review, download, tell your friends, everything. Um, so today we've been joined by a special guest. You know, it's a he's a well-esteemed author of the book The 392. And not only is he an author of this amazing book, he's got another book coming. He's also completing his PhD. I mean, this guy's busy and he's taken some time out of his schedule to come and see us. So we're really honored to have Ashley Hickson-Lovence with us. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm good, brother. Thank you very much. And thanks for having me. And that introduction made my evening. So thank you for that.
It's good, man. I hope we can continue to make your evening as you've been making ours, by even turning up. But Mr. Rich, how you doing, my friend?
All is well, and welcome, Ashley. Thank you for joining.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to having a good old chinwag, and this should be a good evening. Should be good.
Yeah. I mean, given that we're still in lockdown. It's been a year. It's so mad. When it first kind of came around, and we thought, okay, yeah, we'll be out of this in a couple of months, and here we are down the road. The first subject we're going to talk about with Ashley mainly is the kind of journey that the modern creative faces today in 2021, but just in general. And again, over the last year or so, we've seen quite a few new emerging artists and creatives come out because, while everyone's stuck at home, you kind of got people are twiddling their thumbs, and actually some actual real creative people have been able to come out and express themselves and actually, have the time to develop a product. So, Ashley, start with you. What would you say were some of the kind of highs and lows as a modern creative? I mean, I know you've come through with your book, the 392. What were kind of some of the challenges and amazing things that happened to you as you was doing that?
Yeah, it's weird for me to be considered and for me to be labelled a creative, having been a teacher for a few years, and then sort of taking the plunge to say to myself, do you know what, I'm going to try and take this writing thing a bit seriously a few years ago. So it's it's still a label that I'm definitely getting accustomed to slowly, but it feels good. It feels like the whole idea of being a creative is an avenue, is a platform to try and vent and respond to the world around you. And there's been so much going on in the last year, even throughout the sort of laboured period of lockdown. It's been a crazy year, for so many. So being a creative, whether that be in my position as a writer or whether that be as some kind of artist or a photographer, or whatever it is, musician, it feels like it's an appropriate way to respond to the chaos of modern society in many ways. And I feel very privileged in that, because I think a lot of what I write is a sort of social commentary. And sometimes I don't set out to write a social commentary. I don't deliberately go, right, okay, I'm going to talk about politics, or I'm going to talk about race, or I'm going to talk about taking the knee, or whatever it is. But it's such a prominent, there's such prominent themes and such important things in our daily life that it sort of just finds itself into my work. And I suppose, when, like any creative, the big thing is about exposure and getting your name out there. And, social media is a big part of that. And there's lots of issues with social media. I'm just writing about, for my PhD, all the stuff that's going on to footballers at the moment, Anthony Martial, Marcus Rashford, all this abuse they've been receiving, and how, for all its good things that social media does, and about brand building and getting your name out there and all those good things that are sort of entrepreneurial in many ways, there's also the pitfalls of, getting abused, or it not being well managed. it's up and down. So social media is a good and bad thing in the life of a creative, and I suppose it's about navigating that minefield. How are you using it to your benefit, and when does it become disruptive? When does it become bad for your mental health? And all those sort of things. So it's up and down. It is up and down, but for most part, I've absolutely loved being a creative. And if I was to sort of hone that in, I love being a writer. I love writing about the world around me and seeing how it changes and stuff.
Ashley, just for the audience, can you just give us a bit of a flavor as to what your PhD is on? What is 392 about? Just to paint the picture about your lens.
Yeah, so I was a secondary school English teacher in London, South London, then North London. And all the while I was teaching, I was sort of, as a side hustle, writing this book on my phone. I was writing the odd chapter here and there on the train, on the bus. And, those notes collated became my debut novel, The 392, which was released in April 2019 with an independent press who are based in London Fields called Own It. So it's quite a relatively small and new company, but since its release, which is not even 2 years now, it's done really well. I'm really proud of it because it's exceeded my expectations in so many ways because I just didn't think it would have the readership it has. I mean, it didn't win awards or anything, but that doesn't matter to me. It was about trying to engage people who perhaps didn't love reading or perhaps haven't picked up a book in a while, or all sorts of readers, really, all sorts of walks of life. And it done really well, and I'm really chuffed with it. And I suppose, a huge part of its success led to me writing the second book, which is called Your Show. And Your Show is a part of my PhD. So my PhD is in creative writing, but there's a sort of essay with it as well. So it's creative writing and an essay. But the novel is about the only black football referee to referee in the Premier League, and his name was Uriah Rennie. And
right.
I'm a big football fan, and I used to be a referee myself. And it was a story that I've always wanted to tell. So it's been a really bonkers few years, going from teaching to then the 392, and then Your Show, then trying to finish the PhD, which is what I've been doing all day today. So yeah, it's been bonkers. It really has. It's been a mad few years. It's all happening really quickly, but I think my lucky stars that I'm still enjoying it, and enjoying the journey, really.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned about the journey because there's this kind of like plethora of paths you can go down as a creative. It's really kind of pretty open, and writing is arguably one of the harder ones, right? Because you have to first get your work down on paper and then continue to be inspired and motivated to complete this, and to kind of keep the story going. What were the kind of things that kept you going, and the things that initially inspired you to kind of not necessarily move away from teaching, but put it down on paper and then eventually come out with a book, and then go for another book as well?
Yeah, it sounds a bit I don't know, utopian or idealistic, but I really did just need to write. I really did. It felt like it was this cathartic experience for me where I just had to get the words down because, I grew up in Hackney, as in the 90s and noughties, and I saw such change in my area. It had gone from an area where the delivery driver wouldn't come to your state. You had to get a minicab from the high street because it wouldn't come anywhere near your postcode. You had to be careful walking down the road in case you got jacked or something. To then it being an area where there were, very fashionable millennials and £4 coffees and skinny jeans and Chelsea boots. And I didn't know how to deal with that. I really didn't. I was like, so where do I fit exactly? Because, I'm not quite sure. I remember, a sort of anecdote of my mum going to one of these new coffee shops, which opened not too far from us in Hoxton, and her going in and saying, "Can I have a coffee, please?" And then saying, "Yeah, but what kind of coffee? Like, do you want a
Americano, macchiato.
Yeah, exactly. And he went, "No, can I just get a coffee with a drop of milk?" And And that sort of dynamic of not knowing where I sort of fit into this new area was the main starting point, really. And that's what sort of led me to write the first fledgling ideas of the 392. And I honestly didn't think about publication until a lot later, a lot later. I was writing because I enjoyed the process of just venting in some way, like I said earlier, just getting my emotions out there. I mean, if I could sing, I would definitely probably do it through music, but I can't sing. So writing and trying to be somewhat lyrical with my words was the only way that I could think of doing that. So that was the sort of the starting point. And then obviously, as you come towards the end of a project, well, I was sort of halfway through the 392 when I picked up an agent who liked the words that I'd started to write. And that's when it started to become a little bit serious. And I think, that epitomizes the process in many ways, how I see it. I mean, every process is different and subjective for everybody, but you sort of start on your own, and then you need the help of others to get there. And in my case, it was an agent, and then it was the publisher of the 392, so the indie press that I told you about. So yeah, you always start off on your own. You always start off with this goal or drive, and then you do need the help of others, whether that be friends or people in the industry. Because I always say to people who always ask about the process, like, it's all about who you know. And unfortunately, it's a very cliched, hackneyed phrase to say, oh, it's about who you know. But unfortunately, it is the case sometimes, it really is.
I guess you have to play to your strengths, right? It's one of those things, unless you want to be the writer who's also out there and trying to like schmooze and network. It just doesn't really go hand in hand. You just want to focus on what you do best, as any creative, does. So that makes total sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, given that you have this platform now, we all have this platform, the internet's here, you've got social media. Was you publishing little tidbits of your book? Like, how do you leverage the social media now with your book? Like, how do you see that, your self brand almost?
Yeah, I mean, I was starting from scratch. I really was. Everything about my online presence was private because I was a teacher. So I had, up until a few years ago, I didn't really use Instagram too tough. I was, I had it, but I couldn't. It was a private account. Same with Twitter. It was a private account because I didn't want to share anything personal to my students could find. So it was, my online presence, my social media presence was zilch, really. So that was sort of tricky to start with, because when you're being published with an independent press, and I think our marketing budget for the 392 was about a couple £100. It was £200 for a launch video, and maybe I think I paid £100 for a trailer I made, a book trailer I made. But we're talking about £300 marketing. So, social media has really helped. I don't think the 392 would have got as many sales. I mean, I don't think it would have got half as many sales if it wasn't for social media. And sometimes I think that's a little bit like, I don't know. It's just very interesting, I should say. I'm looking forward to, in many ways, because my second book is being published with a much larger publisher, I can sort of rein it in a little bit. Whereas with the free,
well, go big. You can go big, basically. Yeah, you got a bigger budget.
Yeah, we've got a bigger budget. Yeah, definitely got a bigger marketing budget, which means I don't have to, sell myself. I can use my Instagram to, I don't know, post something, post a lovely view, perhaps, because at the moment it's more all 392 related. But yeah, no, it's it's been a very interesting process, and I think I have to, thank social media, because I think it's because of that the 392 has had, the incremental success that it's had.
It's crazy because we started this podcast a few months back, and like you're saying, we're working with money from our own pockets, so the budgets are pretty COVID constrained. But yeah, being able to like get a kind of an audience for free using social media is something that 10, 15 years ago is just something you wouldn't think about. Do you know what I mean? It's just like something that wasn't there. And these would be like the barriers to entry to being a creator. And I think that now, again, with a lot of people at home, and the ease of just getting on a computer and just starting to create whatever it might be. This is probably like one of the most interesting times to be a creative, I guess. And there's and because everyone's out there, you only need a small group of loyal people to be like, yes, like this is the type of work that I want to see, or this is the type of product I want to buy into. um yeah I mean, I didn't really have another question. It was more just kind of acknowledging, the kind of platforms that we have now, I guess. It's really quite interesting.
I would say
Yeah.
that because of COVID and the nationwide lockdowns and stuff, the arts industry and the creative industries have really, really suffered. Obviously, like theaters and gigs and all those sorts of things, which means there is added weight on social media to sort of promote oneself, because there isn't that platform that you would usually go to in person, like the gigs and the theaters and whatnot. So I think it's become ever important to use social media in many ways, to keep momentum going for people who are in the creative industries, because at the moment, it's been a very stagnated year or a whole year basically of doing very little. And how do you how do you utilize your creative abilities if you can't do it in person, because we can't at the moment. So yeah, it's definitely tricky, and I do think social media has a huge part to play. And yeah, like you said, it's all about a loyal following, which hopefully gets larger and larger if that's what you want it and need it to be, as you produce more work or as you build on your craft, which I think is really important. The whole idea of building a craft is really important, because the 392 is by no means a polished work, but it's just one step in that journey. And I'm going to use that analogy quite a lot of journey, I think, because it's a bus route. But it's
Cool.
the beginning of the route. It's the beginning of the route.
I love the journey. I always say life is a journey. So your book is a part of your journey. It's kind of metaphoric. Exactly. But also, like, a part of me, I think I might have mentioned this to you, like, Aaron. I want to write a book one day, and part of it is just that I just want to share my story. I feel like I just like to leave something that lives beyond me, which is like, I don't know if that's the ego or not, but I just feel like, it's quite a nice thought to say, like, something will live beyond me, and it's these written words and it's my expressions. And I'm just trying to think as well, like, nowadays we're in an age of pure information. Like, there's information overload. There's information there's books everywhere flying around. Like, how do you kind of go from kind of successful to significant? Like, your idea, maybe this is like, it's a refinement, it's a process, but you idea what you want to make an impact on the world, whatever it is, your message you want to put out there. So, and it's quite hard now with social media and stuff like that. You need to get an angle. So it's I'm just trying to think how you tackle the world of just pure abundance of information and data overload to cut through that noise.
Yeah, definitely. It definitely is interesting. I think it's just one, for me, it's as a creative, as a writer, it's just one step at a time, I think. I mean, I love, the idea of leaving a legacy is definitely important to me, because I think it's about, lowering the ladder for others, the higher up you go. Definitely, I'm a firm believer of that. When I hopefully release a few more books and, call it a day, perhaps, I want to sort of talk about my experiences to others so I can pass on the baton, so to speak. But in relation to, like goals and stuff, I just take it one step at a time, and think, so this book was published, the 392 was by an indie press, did well, and then I want the next book to do even better. I don't want to, masses of awards or a slew of awards necessarily, but just do a little bit better each time, and that I would take that. Just sort of very sensible aims, and there are going to be better writers than me, like there are going to be better musicians than you if you're a musician, there's going to be better artists than you or whatever, but it's not about comparing yourself. And I try not to compare myself with others too much, because everybody's situation, like I talked about before, every sort of context is very different, it's very nuanced, so there's no point doing that, because everybody's life is different, everybody's scenario is different. So yeah, I don't compare myself too much. I just celebrate every success as well. I'm a big fan of that. Celebrate every success, and I'm sometimes not guilty of doing that. Sometimes I sort of think about the next task before I sort of have time to enjoy something that I've done. But I'm going to try and enjoy smaller successes when I can, because I think, especially with the pandemic going on, you just don't know what's around the corner. So that's definitely some tips. Definitely some tips, like small steps.
Sure. I think we're all pretty guilty of that. Get something done, make an accomplishment, and so quickly kind of put our mind to the next thing and almost like look over what we've just done.
Yeah.
And it's really quite common. Maybe the older you get as well, maybe there's this kind of like outside underlying pressure that your time's about to run out. You've got like 50 years. so it's like, okay, well, like now I need to move on to the next thing. And kind of echoing what you said, maybe this situation we're in with COVID has allowed people to slow down a bit more and be like, actually, this is good. Like I've got this thing and actually I should be proud and I should take a moment to just live it. Do you know what I mean? It's like, yeah, this is great.
Definitely.
Yeah. I mean, I'm gonna move on to the next subject, but it's all totally related. So the 392, I read a bit of it, and it details this like journey from, what is it, Hoxton to Highbury?
That's right. Yeah.
36 minutes, and it's told in all these kind of different perspectives of the people that are on this route. Like, you're a Londoner. We're all Londoners, myself and Rich, we're from South London. You're from Hackney. Yeah, there's no issues. It depends what football team you support, but really, there's no issues.
Okay, wait. That's a big point there. I'm a Man United fan.
Oh,
that is just wrong. That's just wrong.
I liked you, Ashley. I did. I was trying my best, bro. I'm a Gooner. I'm an Arsenal fan.
Yeah, I'm going to say the same, but it's disheartening at the moment. It's not quite the flag I want to fly.
Oh yeah, it's hard times. It's been hard times.
Everyone's an enemy.
Yeah. I mean, I've got a little boy, and for some reason he thinks he supports Man United. His uncle supports Man United, and growing up, Man United are always that team that always won, always took the glory, and the fans are always so like cocky and boisterous.
Is that what you think?
And he was like, oh, you know what? Yeah, defo. And you'd always think, you know what, those Man United, I hate those guys, And when my son came to me and said he supports Man United, I've tried to throw every other team. I've thrown international teams at him. I've thrown I can't throw Arsenal. We're not winning. Support Barcelona, please.
Fair play.
So
fair play.
Yeah. So I mean, I think I was reading that you're in Norwich now, right?
I am. Yes. Yeah.
So are your family? I imagine you still got family back in Hackney.
That's right.
Yeah. So what does Hackney look like now to you versus Hackney before you left or when you was young?
Yeah. I love Hackney to bits. I really do. Like, Hackney is my home. I would get Hackney council logo tattooed on me. That's how much I love Hackney. Like, it is my home. I feel funny inside every time I'm there, and I go back. Well, before COVID, relatively regularly. Hackney is my home, but it has changed. And obviously, it's been a few decades since I grew up there. As a young boy. So obviously it changes, but it's properly changed more than most places have. Down the years. It's a combination of, like I talked about before, a new type of people moving in, which is kind of good, because it means new facilities, new amenities, a new vibe, a new feel, which is all good. But it's just weird, It's just about getting accustomed to change, it's changed so much in 20 odd years. I don't know what it's going to look like in 20 odd years from now. Like, it's just so rapid. It really is rapid. But yeah, Hackney is my home. I feel in touch with its people usually, the sights and the smells. And that's why this bus journey, which is a made up bus journey, the 392 does not exist. It's a made up bus route. I looked at the list of TfL bus routes and it was the only one that was free at the time. So I thought, okay, I'll take that number. And I made up this bus route from Hoxton, which is where my mum lives now and where I grew up. So I grew up in a flat in Hoxton with my mum. And then it stopped in Highbury, where I moved to after I left my mum's, not too far from the Arsenal Stadium, actually. So I made up this bus route. So it's a sort of metaphorical journey from where I was born to where I was going to. And this flat I had in Highbury was actually was a really nice flat, and Highbury is actually quite a really affluent area compared to Hoxton. So it's a sort of metaphorical journey about how I'm going from a sort of rougher-ish working class environment to then moving up in the world, to going to a flat which a 1-bedroom flat which costs a lot of money. So it's sort of a metaphorical journey which takes place, and that's why it's such a sort of very close and sentimental book to me. But yeah, Hackney's changing, but you could say that about a lot of areas in London, which are very similar. Perhaps not at the same rate, but you've got Dalston, you've got Walthamstow, all over really. I'm not sure how gentrification looks in South London. I mean, I know that places like Croydon and even Norwood, places like that are sort of going a bit wild with gentrification at the moment as well. But it's happening all over, really.
It's definitely all over. I think, it's just been really good to see. I don't know, maybe many people will agree with me on that, but I don't know. I think it feels like it's progression, but some people might be like, it's not. It's more adverse effects to them. There's two sides of the coin. But I grew up in New Cross. Pretty wild back, but back when I was young anyway. You had this like blue borough kind of thing going on, and you had Frontline, you had all these kind of things happening. People phone were getting robbed. You had like these guys in Woolwich, like there's a whole heap of gang warfare, it felt like. And now I don't know, maybe I'm older, so I'm out of it, so it's a bit different. But now you got, as you say, you got these £4 coffee shops, and these coffee shops I attend regularly now, because it feels like it's grew like London has grown with me almost, or these areas have grown with me. So now I in these areas where I probably would try to go out quickly, I'm there, I'm looking around like, wow, you've got some nice little like cake shops on the corner, and now you've got these like hipsters, and like I feel like my jeans are too long, so I need to kind of pull them up a bit and wear the white socks. It's all a bit, and it's similar to Brooklyn. I think I've been to Brooklyn a couple of times, and it has that same hipster feel. You've got the projects there, but it's no longer the projects. It's all kind of like gentrified. I think, me personally, I think it's a good thing. I like walking around and reminiscing to what it was, but also seeing what it is now.
Yeah, no, I think I have the same sort of conundrum, and I think that's something that I'm toying with in the book, where it's like there are lots of good things about it, and I think for most part, the introduction of coffee shops, I know that sounds a bit, like it's just coffee shops, but no, coffee shops and cool bars, and there's a sort of different feel about the place, and maybe crime numbers are not so high as they were perhaps. So that's all really good things. There, I also feel there's some negative bits about it, which I'm sort of a bit, and that's the fact that my mum would never be able to afford a place there to live ever, because they've gone up, house prices have gone up. They've gone up everywhere nationally, but it's gone up even more in places like Hackney or New Cross because of the university and whatnot. So that's something that I am a bit uncomfortable with. But there are definitely some good and bad parts about gentrification, and that's something that I was trying to explore in the 392, because every character feels a little bit different about it. Some characters are profiting from it, some characters are being pushed out, and there's a quote about people being pushed out in towards Essex and stuff, and that does sometimes happen, when the council buys up old council flats, don't they, and sort of redevelop them and then displace people, which can be sort of very disheartening. But yeah, there's definitely ups and downs with gentrification in localized pockets, like we've seen it in places in London. Definitely. two sides of the coin.
I think Rich, you mentioned this kind of comparison between New York and here. And I remember, I've got some stories now. I remember being in the car and talking to one guy from New York, and he says to me, "You know what, man? London is exactly like New York. It's always under construction. It's forever under construction, and this construction never ends. You know, it's just always under construction." And I think there was a couple of years back. I think it was the Evening Standard. And I was reading that Peckham was voted the happiest place in London. I was like, Peckham over Hampstead Heath, over like all these like areas that know in London, Blackheath. There's places that these are happy people. There aren't any problems in Hampstead Heath. There might be, but they're very relative.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and Peckham, and I was thinking, when I was growing up, I would not go to Peckham. That's just something. That's somewhere you don't go. It's like there's nothing there for you. And I went to school in Deptford, which again another area that once upon a time it's just like, why are you there? Like it's just there's nothing good that's going to happen. You'd be walking along like Deptford Market, and you just see people running and like just wild stuff happening, and you get desensitized after a while. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I was dropping someone off. This was maybe about 2 years ago. In Deptford, I was dropping someone off, and I've dropped them off, and my window's down a little bit, and I can hear this buzz of people, and I was like, "What's this buzz? Let me just park up the car and just look. What's this buzz?" And I've walked around to where like Deptford Station is, and it's got this whole amazing, craft beer, lovely restaurants, and all of this. And I'm just standing in the middle with my mouth open, like, just like, how did this happen? When did this happen?
Yeah.
And it happened like a couple of years before I visited it, and so I'm very much in the middle, like you, Ashley. It's like, look, this is great. This is business to the area. This is new ideas. This is new people. This is new money to the area. But what about the people that were there before? Do you know what I mean? And what about their experiences now of this? I mean, again, on Deptford High Street, there was this. This was, to me, this was like the height of the irony of gentrification. There used to be a job centre, and it closed down. And then a pub opened where the job centre was, and the name of the pub was called the Job Centre, and they sell £5 pints.
Love it.
It's like, are you like the irony, and it's almost kind of rude. Do you know what I mean?
That's brilliant. I mean, that's brilliant. But that's a short story right there. I might have to write that. I have to steal that idea. That's so.
Dude,
take it.
Dude, go there. But yeah, I mean, like you're saying, man, there's this question as to what of the people that might have been living there for 30 years, 40 years, now, prices of rent have pushed them out, and the ability to buy a house in somewhere like Brixton is, for children of Chelsea. Do you know what I mean? It's not for people that have actually lived in Brixton for the last 30, 40 years.
No, as I say, Brixton's definitely a place of, I don't know if you've been Brixton, Ashley, like recently or whatever, but every time I go to Brixton, it's like the most funkiest place. It's edgy. You got all sorts there. There's such a vibe on that high street. And, if you think back, if anybody looks this up, you say the Brixton riots in the 1980s, and, it's like, well, the shubs were happening, squatters and all that kind of stuff. And now, you try to buy a place there, it's just like, it's off the radar, really. So yeah, it's interesting. And even there's another place, like there's a couple of people that I've worked with previously, and these guys are like well-to-do, speak super posh, whatever, and they're like, oh yeah, I'm just going to buy a flat in Peckham. I'm like, what? Yeah, Queen's Road. And I'm like, huh? Because these, I just remember Queen's Road is like, you got the Queen's Road boys, and you're like, you don't really want to go where the Queen's Road boys are, because it's just it's curtains.
Yeah. It's unnecessary.
And then there was another guy who I was like studying with, and he was like, yeah, my dad's just helped me get a deposit, and I've bought a place in Dawston. I was like, Dawston's very trendy. Like, this was when it was trendy. But I was thinking, yeah, it's probably very expensive as well. It's it's crazy. But it's London. Like
Yeah,
London is a fantastic place, you know.
it is. Yeah, and I think it's kind of good that, I suppose, because I've had experiences where I've had scared of Brixton and Peckham. I used to referee all in South London. I used to referee in Wandsworth. I used to referee Clapham Junction. I used to referee all those places in South London. But I wouldn't go to Brixton and Peckham because when I was growing up, I just wasn't, I was fearful of Brixton. I was fearful of Peckham. And then it's only when I worked in Brixton, I used to work in a school just south of Brixton in Tulse Hill. Was when I was like, oh, actually, Brixton is so cool. Like, this is mad. Like, this is crazy. Like, the reputation has completely changed, and everything you said, Rich, is so true. Like, Brixton is probably one of the funkiest places, like in relation to like one of the hippest places there probably is in London these days. Like, it's pretty mad considering, 10 years ago, 10, 15 years ago, it was really rough. But I would still say the McDonald's and the KFC in Brixton is still pretty rough on a Friday night after a certain time.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
Be careful.
Things can easily, it can go wrong. There's bouncers out there, like it can go wrong.
Bouncers at McDonald's door. I mean, imagine that.
I mean, would you still say that London is probably one of the best places in the UK, if not maybe Europe or the world, for creatives to exist and flourish? Do you think?
Oh, in many ways, yes. In many ways, yes, because there's so much happening. You can make a good network. You can meet a good network of people, of fellow creatives. But the expense is really off-putting. And also, if you can like work under the noise of, the constant noise, there is a musicality to London, but I mean, there's sirens and there's the hustle and bustle, and if you can work under those circumstances, then I suppose it is conducive to that experience. But I live in one of the quieter cities probably in the country, in Norwich, where you don't hear anything. I mean, I'm 10 minutes from the centre and it's quiet. The street lamps go off at like probably in an hour, like, about 11 o'clock. Which is great because it means I really have some quiet time to write. It also means it's a lot cheaper here. I'm paying about half the price I did in London, and I have a garden and a study, and I write in my study. Whereas before I was writing on my kitchen table. So for so many reasons, London is a place to be because you can go out and socialize and network, and it's the hotbed of creativity. Like events and it's where it's always happening. But in relation to having a conducive experience to write music or write books or take photographs or whatever it is, then maybe leaving London is the way forward. I'm still in two minds about how long I'm going to stay here. I finished a PhD in a few months, so yeah, I've got a big decision to make. I think I will stay here, to be honest, because I've got accustomed to people saying hello to you when they walk past you and stuff and smile, and all those sort of things you don't do in London. So yeah, it's got some ups and downs with London, but it's what you make it, really.
That's true. I mean, the whole thing of London's a great place, but there's so many different people, and it feels it's quite sort of transient in a way. Like, I don't know, it feels. It's not like how I feel my mum grew up and my dad grew up, where the community was stronger. The sense of community where you say hello to your neighbours and all that kind of stuff. I don't know if it's a London. I think it's a London thing because the speed of London has just gone up crazy versus these outer towns or smaller cities. So I do think that there's good merit to having that connection with just your locals, or just people to saying hello, as opposed to this hostility or this like a bit. If you're in London and you say hello, it's like, why are you saying hello to me? What's your motive? Like,
yeah, 100%.
And as gentrification as it can be or as it gets, that doesn't really change. And I don't quite know where that got lost, but
it'd be interesting to find out how the pandemic will change things, because there is this idea that we talked about how people move to London because they want to sort of chase a dream or chase a job, whatever it is. Will that change now that people are working from home a lot more? And is London going to be the hotbed of work that it was before the pandemic, when people don't really need to be in their offices, or people don't need to be on location as much. Since we've learned how to use Zoom and Teams and whatnot, it's interesting to know what London's going to look like.
I think that's really, really an important thing to come out of this, right? Because again, as everything kind of gets moved online, what warrants the prices of London if that's the case? Do you know what I mean? Like, why would you want to be there? You can be in Norwich where you feel as if you're in more of a community, and the settings are more, well, they're more sustainable. Put it that way. Like London isn't. I love London. Every time I leave here and go to another city or another country, I come back and I love it a little bit more. But I recognized a long time ago that if you stay in London for the duration of your life, come into the end part of your life, it's going to be too much. This is a young person's place, and when I mean young, I don't mean like 20, 30. I mean probably up to about mid 50s. This is a young person's place, and as you get older, you begin to appreciate being part of a community, or you begin to appreciate nature or peace, and given the amount of people that are in London, that's never going to be this place. So for those that are creative, or those that are maybe going down a route that's not the typical kind of corporate path, will London still be as attractive after the coronavirus, and we realize actually, yeah, well, maybe we can do a ton of this stuff just online. I could be anywhere. I could be on a beach somewhere, half the price.
Yeah.
So
it's just going to be really interesting. And I've read loads of different reports saying people are looking for new homes outside of London because they've realized, they want a bit more green space and the sense of community that we've talked about. And also, the expense, when you're renting a 1-bedroom flat and you have to work from home, and you're more likely to get sick of your 4 walls a lot quicker, I think, if you're stuck indoors and it's a lot smaller space. So yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting. And will that open it up for more foreign investment? Because there's already been this thing where in some places in London, properties being sold to people who might not even be in the country, and will that go up because of the pandemic? It'd just be really interesting to know. And looking ahead, it really will be what the faces of London will look like.
There'll probably be a hell of a lot more creatives being inspired by the scenes of Norwich and Poole and the Surrey Downs and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, maybe a Norwich version of the 392 or a Bournemouth.
Yeah. The only thing is that bus probably comes like once every 2 hours.
Such a good point. I was doing an interview a few weeks ago, and so like with the 392, it's about how you meet different people on this bus route, and you don't know their story, old, young, black, white, house owning, house renting, whatever. But someone said to me, the bus I take, like you were saying, it only comes 3 times a day, and I know everybody who gets on, so I already know their stories already. They're my neighbors, my friends, they're my neighbors. Whereas in London, like everybody, even if you got the same bus every day, there's going to be new people every time because it's just so big, it's just so large. London is massive. There's so many different people in different walks of life.
I think one thing that a lot of people that are not from London that come to live in London, especially people from like small towns, what they first struggle with but then begin to love is the kind of anonymity. If you're from a space where there's like, you're part of a community, everyone knows your business, and then you go to this place where nobody knows you, even the people that knew you yesterday, they don't know you today, they're not interested. It provides a level of freedom in some senses. Do you know what I mean? It's like you can recreate your character every day. Like your reputation of yesterday doesn't have to be a reputation of today. And I think there's something about that pace and that anonymity that is attractive about big cities, but it's not just London. Do you know what I mean? There's plenty of places around the world that kind of have that kind of aspects to it. But yeah, man. I mean, would you? I mean, you did kind of mention it before, but would you consider living back in London? And if so, where would it be? Would it be back in kind of Highbury area?
He's moved up in life. He'll be in Hampstead.
Yeah. No, it's a good question. I'm still thinking about it. I mean, it's so dependent on like next steps. in life. But I would live in London, I think I would, and I wouldn't have said that last year. So that's definitely progress. So I felt like I'd left it. It felt right. I was moving for good. But I think depending on the area, I would move back to London. I'm not sure if I would even move to East London. I might try somewhere new. I might try somewhere
South.
New.
Yeah.
No.
No.
I wouldn't rule anything out, because London is, like I said, I mean, it is the city of opportunity. I hopefully want to work in universities one day, teach creative writing and that. And there are so many decent universities, in London, that I would like to work in perhaps one day. And I wouldn't say no to moving back to London. It is just it is a great place. For all its faults, it's just a wonderful, wonderful place. And I feel the same way when I leave the country or when I leave the city for a long, long, long time. I definitely do miss it, and I feel at home when I come back. So yeah, London is very close to my heart. It really, really is.
Yeah, mine too. But just a question, actually. You seem like a very eloquent young man studying creative writing. What is creative writing? Just out of interest. I mean, like, what do you, how do you express, or how do you get a grade in creative writing without being Shakespeare?
That's a good question, because it's an emerging subject in many ways, because there weren't many universities that sort of allowed you to study creative writing at university level, maybe about 10, 15 years ago. The university that I'm currently at, University of East Anglia, is one of the first universities to offer creative writing. I think it was in the late 70s, early 80s. It was the first university to offer creative writing as a taught subject. And it was very controversial at the time, because the whole argument was, can you teach creative writing? And that went on for many, many years. But now, more or less every single university in the country has a sort of creative writing, either module or whole course, so like whole BA course. So it's definitely a growing subject. More and more universities are choosing to do creative writing or offer creative writing as courses. So I did an English degree, and then I did my teaching degree, and then I decided to do my creative writing master's part-time. So I did it in the evening. So I was teaching, and then after work on Wednesdays, often, sometimes other days, I would go into City University, which is just near Barbican, and I did my creative writing master's. And that was essentially about a little bit of theory about creative writing. So people who write about how to write, lots of exercises, how to write dialogue properly, how to include sensory language, so you have a vivid description of a scene, and all these sort of things, which were really, really helpful. So that's it really. But I suppose for me, it's all about, I think it can be taught in many ways. I mean, a lot of it is innate, but for you to improve, I suppose, a course of some kind. I'm not necessarily saying a BA or an MA or anything like that, because that's an expense, and sometimes it's not perhaps always worth it, depending on the situation, depending on the course, depending on the institution. But I think modules or part-time courses or anything like that is definitely beneficial, because it helps you network, and it just helps your writing be looked at by someone else, by new eyes, by fresh eyes. It's been a wonderful experience. It really has. And with the PhD, there isn't much teaching going on. It's just me doing lots of research. So I've wrote the second book, and then I'm writing an essay alongside it, which is about how the autobiographies of Black footballers are often told by white journalists, and how there's a discrepancy there. So I've been reading lots of autobiographies, reading lots of theory, and trying to put together an essay of about 25,000 words. It's really fresh in my head today, because I've been working on it all day. So my brain's a bit frazzled. But essentially, I'm looking at how, they don't do a good job, essentially. Autobiographies are often poorly told. They often rely on tropes of what it means to be a Black man. So it's often hyper-violent, hyper-sexualized, poorly written linguistically, so it doesn't really read like a decent book sometimes, compared to white footballers. It's been really interesting. Yeah, it's been good. It's been good.
So I had a question,
Mhm.
and it's on behalf of somebody who's writing their own book. So this term, obviously, it happens for a lot of writers. They get writer's block. I mean, what would you just? I don't know. Have you had writer's block, and what would you describe it feeling like, and how would you get around something like that?
Yeah, writer's block. I don't get it very often. I think every writer does get it at some point. And that sounds really cocky that I don't get it often, but it's just because I have a very unconventional way of writing. I don't plan anything. I just write when I feel like and go with it, and see where my thoughts take me. But I obviously have experienced it in the past. I get it a lot when I'm writing critical work, not so much when I'm doing creative work. But first thing I would say is it's incredibly common. Like everybody, wherever you're writing, everybody experiences it at some point. Some more regularly than others, and that's definitely okay. I would say just try and make, if one is experiencing writer's block, make smart aims. So what I mean by that is, measurable aims in which you can say, right, okay, I'm going to write 200 words by the end of the week. And even if you think like you're writing rubbish and it's not very good, it doesn't matter. I've got this poster in my room that I write in, and it says, the purpose of the first draft is to get it written, not written well. So I just bang out the words. The quality to me doesn't quite matter that yet. As long as I've got the spine of a story, I'm happy. And then I can spend time printing it out, reading aloud, editing, make corrections, do it again, print it out, read it aloud, edit. And I do that. I mean, for my second book, Your Show, I've got about 3 massive ring binders of times that I printed it out, read it aloud, edited it, done it again. And I keep doing that. I use a photocopy company just down the road, and they see me all the time, and they go, "Oh, you're printing out your story again? How's it going?" Honestly, like it's stuff like that. I just do that, and I do that, and then I unearth whatever beauty there is. I'm unearthing it every time. I'm editing it, I'm carving away at it, getting rid of bits that aren't needed, changing bits here and there, and I get, you finally get there. The process wasn't that formulaic like that to that extent with the 392, because I was a little bit rushed for time, and like I said to you, I did that on my phone. But with Your Show, my second novel, that was the process, like over and over again, printing it, reading it, editing it, just because you can unearth the good stuff the more you do it. And basically, writer's block is very normal. Also, what I would say is writing exercises sometimes help. So sometimes, I don't do this very, very often, but when I'm really stuck, I print out a picture which I think is, there's lots happening in it, and I just write for 10 minutes on that picture. Just write, and it doesn't matter what I'm writing. It doesn't matter if I digress and start talking about Jaffa cakes and Capri Suns. Just keep writing, and there'll be a beautiful line in there that I can use. There really would be, that's the start. Once you have a sentence, that's the start.
Nice.
Interesting.
There's a lot there.
Yeah, I'm gonna write a book tomorrow. No more writer's block for me. That's it.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I know a lot of writers and would-be writers, people that have, completed their books, and people that are in the process of completing their books. And I've heard it a ton of times. I think there's only one time when I've decided to kind of like not as necessarily write a book, but more of like an account of what's happening in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And the most interesting thing, the part of that process, which I, enjoyed, was reading it back, like maybe 6 months down the road, and you read it back, and I just remember reading it. I'm like, you are just a comedian, aren't you? You're not a serious person. Well, what's actually coming out is just jokes about your life, and and but I think honestly, in one of our earlier podcasts, when we first started out, was talking about kind of like the importance of a creative outlet for everyone, and it's really it's kind of really easy to identify. Okay, I want to be creative, so I'm going to draw pictures or paint stuff, but creativity is not like that. That is like there's so many different layers of creativity. But I do think it's very important that everybody has at least one creative outlet, whether that be, I don't know, thinking even, like being able to just think creatively. I spent some time earlier last year just coloring. It was great. It was great. It was really calming to the mind. And I just, I respect somebody that has been able to take their creation and then like be able to put it to a point where they share it with everyone else. It's anyone can get this. It's like, okay, you've spent enough time on your creative outlet to share it, to get it to a state where it's shareable, like, and so yeah, man, like huge congratulations to you, man, and the next book I'd hope to see, and I hope it really, really, really does well for sure. And with everything you do, with the PhD, all of it, man, it's really inspiring.
Thank you so much. That means a lot. It really does. Yeah, I'm just embracing the journey as we go on. And I think, you're very right about having a creative outlet. I think that's, that's a very sort of poignant way to round it all up, because, where possible, I think it's healthy to try and, use your voice. I don't mean that literally sometimes, but use what you have to respond to the world around us. And if you can do that in a creative way, then I think it's for the benefit for everybody, really, including yourself mainly. So yeah, definitely, that sounds really good. I always think to myself, if I was to go on that program Pointless, Pointless, yeah? They say, this is Ashley, and then what would I say? What's my thing? Luckily I've written a book and stuff, but what's your thing? Is it you like colouring books? And they'll go, okay, that's really interesting. Like, okay, good. Or you have a podcast. Oh, sick. That's really interesting. What's your podcast about? So yeah, I think it's definitely good to have that creative outlet. It adds a sort of tapestry to one's life, and I've been trying to embrace it fully. So yeah, thank you anyway for your kind words. It really means a lot.
Rich?
Yeah, I was just like going to sign out and say, all kind of like great minds or great kind of like creatives are mad. So not like, actually, I don't know if you're mad now, but at some point you might need to become mad to become great. So I'm just saying, like, let your inner madness come free at some point. You might need to do that. Just to say. But,
Good point.
And hopefully when that inner madness comes free, it also inspires you to go and support a different football team, man.
We're second when this podcast is released, and you're 10th.
Cut.
It's hard to talk about.
Let's cut him off. Leave that.
All right, Ashley, thanks a lot for joining us, man. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a good laugh, and also really insightful. So yeah, cheers, guys. Thank you.